Alright, so how many of you have ever taken a picture? Something you want to save till later. Let's think about another word for a picture. Have you ever heard of a photo or a photograph? So a photograph is the original word that people used for pictures. And the word photograph comes from in two parts. You have photo, which means light, and graph, which means to draw, to sketch, something like that. So we're going to do some pictures today, or some photographs today, only we're going to use a little different kind of camera. My camera is going to be this piece of wood. The lens for my camera is going to be this little piece of plexiglass. Now, photo is very important when we're out in the woods because every living plant that's out here is using the light, or photo, to go through a process called photosynthesis, which then makes food for that plant. And so we're going to use photo, or light, to take a picture, and the subject of our picture is going to be a leaf. Now I've picked up 3 different leaves. I've picked up this leaf, which was from the white oak tree. I can tell it's from the white oak tree because of the rounded lobes on the ends. I have another leaf that looks very similar. It's another oak leaf. But if we look at the point, the tips, or the lobes, they have a pointed lobe. So this is from the black oak or red oak family of trees. This one I think happens to be a black oak leaf. And finally, this leaf would have been found in a cluster of 5 on its tree. This is from the hickory tree. And if we look carefully, you can kind of see the little sawtooth edge on there. For some reason though, you can never find a good hickory leaf in the spring. They always rot and break down very quickly. My film, keep in mind that today, most of you take a picture with your phone, and it is a digital picture. In the old days, we took pictures with something called a camera with film. And the film camera actually you had to put the film in the back of the camera. You had to be very careful to keep it dark. When you were done, you had to send it off to be developed, or maybe you developed it yourself in a dark room. But those days are past. We're going to kind of reinvent that today though, because we're going to use a type of film that's really paper. It's called blueprint paper. And I'm going to go ahead and get a piece out of this nice black covering. If I expose this to the light, all this paper will be ruined. So I'm going to take out one piece. And when I look at this one piece, I have sort of yellow on one side, white on the other. I'm going to put the yellow side up. I'm going to put my lens over it like so. And then my picture, or my image, will be where the leaf is at. And it happens because that's where the sun does not go to. I'm going to step out here in the sunlight for just a minute and see if I can get some sunlight on my leaf. Now I'm going to come back, and all the yellow has gone from my paper. It looks sort of a pinkish color right now. I'm going to drop this piece of paper into the developer, which is actually ammonia. So if your head's kind of stuffy right now, it will clear that out. We can see there's a little yellow left on there. I will drop it in there. I'll let it set for about 30 seconds. And it will develop and become a pretty picture. Alright, so we put our picture to be developed inside of here, and we pull it out, and our photograph is a nice pretty picture of a bluish colored leaf. The paper is actually called blueprint paper, and if you had lived 50 years ago when they were drawing designs for building, this is what they would have drawn them on, was blueprint paper. That's why they call the design for a building a blueprint. So here I have a nice white oak leaf print. I will keep this, take it home, and put it on the wall at school.
Alright guys, so Mr. Law just went through the process of making a sun print with the blueprint paper and talked about some different ways that we can identify trees. So one obviously would be the leaves that he showed you during that craft. So that would be one way. Another good way to identify trees is by the bark. So this one right here, pretty common tree that you can find at Ashton Wildwood Park. And if you look at the bark, you can see that it peels off of the main trunk. When they're smaller in diameter like this, we don't get as much of the bark peeling off, but some of the large trees will have bark shagging off or splitting off of the trunk the entire way. So this one's called a shagbark hickory. And believe it or not, some of the bat species that live in this area will actually use shagbark hickory trees to roost in after they feed at night. So after they catch a bunch of insects, they'll actually crawl up underneath of the bark peeling off of the trunk, and they can sit there and digest their food. So bark would be one way. Another one, if you can come this way a little bit, Jade. Let's look at this here. So on the ends of the branches, you can see right now, it almost looks like a banana peel as you peel it back. So these are actually the scales of the bud. So during the early spring, we wouldn't have these leaves popping out quite yet, but the end of it would just be a bud, and the shagbark hickory kind of has a fuzzy bud scale on the end. And later in the spring, as the days get longer and the temperatures start to warm up, these buds will burst open, and inside of there you can see that we have our leaves. So another way to identify the tree would be by the buds or by the scars, the leaf scars, where a bud or a leaf used to be the previous year. So different trees have different designs on their leaf scars, their bundle scars, and so that's another way that we can identify some of our trees. The last one, Katie talked about this earlier, some of the different things that you can take home from Ashton Park, one of those being nuts or fruits. So this one right here, this is the outside covering or the shell from the shagbark hickory nut, and this right here would be the nut inside. So that one's been broken open. That's where the meat from the seed would be, and that's what a full shagbark hickory nut looks like.
The woods out here at Ashton Park is what we describe as oak hickory dominant woods. And dominant simply means there's more oaks and hickories than other kinds of trees. They tend to be the bigger trees that are out here. They've taken over the area. And so behind me here we've got some really big old white oak trees. We can tell the difference between some trees just by looking at their bark. And white oak trees have sort of a light gray bark, and their leaves have lobes, but they're kind of rounded around the edges, like we showed you. And so they produce a lot of acorns that animals like to eat, and great wildlife habitat that's out here. Now, one problem though with our oak trees at Ashton is they are experiencing something called oak wilt, and basically there's a fungus that's spreading underground from the roots of these trees, and that fungus gets into the system of the tree that carries the water and the nutrients throughout the tree, and basically that tree eventually dies from it. And because we have so many oaks that are so close together, it has spread pretty quickly through Ashton Park, and you'll see a lot of dead oaks. In fact, these two big white oaks here behind me are both dead. This one, the bark has been dropping off of it, and they're starting to fall over out here. They do make good wildlife habitat, but we hate to lose a lot of our oak trees. As we go down the trail here just a little bit further, another one we can tell from looking at the bark is this one right here. If you look at the bark, it's real warty looking, very bumpy and warty. This is a hackberry tree, and hackberry does have an edible little purple berry. Birds and little mammals like skunks and animals like that like to eat the berries from the hackberry trees. And also back here just behind us a little bit further in the woods, we have some black oak trees, and some of them are dead. There's a few still alive. They have a darkish blackish bark, and their leaves are more pointed at the ends. They have pointed lobes. They're actually a member of the red oak tree family, where the leaves turn red before they drop off in the fall. But we're coming up to an area here where there's a lot of dead black oak trees because of that oak wilt that they're experiencing. As you explore a forest, you'll notice there's a lot of different layers of the forest. And that's important because many different animals live and make use of the various layers that are out here. When we look at the very top layer of the forest, where those branches reach the tippy top, that's our canopy layer. And there's a lot of little birds and animals that are going to make their home up there. Then we go a little bit lower. There's some smaller trees underneath those giant oaks and hickories that make the canopy. But the smaller trees here are the understory of the forest. And there are some birds and animals that prefer that layer to make their nests and their homes in. As we go a little bit farther down from the understory, we have what we call the shrub and vine layer. So a lot of our shrubs out here are berry bushes, gooseberries, black raspberries. We might have some tree saplings and some other vines. We have a real thorny one called greenbrier that's out here. It's kind of a pain to walk through. Our poison ivy and Virginia creeper vines are also in that layer. Then we go down from the shrub and vine and we hit the forest floor where there's a lot of wildflowers. We see there's some yellow violets here, some bedstraw. We've got some leaves from wild geraniums starting to come up. So that's our forest floor, and obviously a lot of small animals are going to make their home right in the forest floor. And then of course we could dig down deeper into the soil, and we call that the basement layer. And so out here we might have obviously worms, beetles, ants, moles, things like that would dig down under the soil and make their home in that basement layer.